Captain Taemin gripped the control stick as his ship shook violently. Red warning lights flashed across the cockpit of the UES Meridian. Outside the viewport, purple lightning crackled through space in ways that should not be possible. Navigation. System offline, the computer announced in its calm voice. Life support at 60%. Engine power failing. Taemin cursed under his breath. The ion storm had come from nowhere, hitting his reconnaissance ship like an invisible fist. He had been mapping this sector for 3 weeks without any problems. Now his ship was dying around him. Emergency landing protocol, he said aloud. The computer beeped and showed him the nearest planet on his cracked display screen. Kepler 442c appeared as a blue-white ball of ice and rock. Warning: planet surface temperature -40 degrees Celsius. Atmosphere breathable but hostile. Landing not recommended. Taemin laughed without humor. Yeah, well, staying in space isn't recommended either. He pointed the ship toward the frozen world below. The Meridian screamed through the thin atmosphere, her hull glowing red-hot despite the freezing air outside. Taemin fought the controls as the ship bucked and rolled like an angry animal. The ground rushed up to meet him. Ice plains stretched in every direction, broken by jagged black rocks that looked like broken teeth. Taemin pulled back on the stick, trying to find a smooth place to land. The ship hit the ice with tremendous force. Metal screamed and tore as the Meridian slid across the frozen surface for nearly a kilometer. Taemin's head slammed into his restraint harness. Stars exploded across his vision. When the world stopped spinning, he found himself hanging upside down in his pilot seat. Blood dripped from his forehead onto the cracked ceiling below him. The ship had come to rest on its back like a dead whale. Emergency lighting cast everything in red shadows. Taemin unbuckled himself and dropped to what had been the ceiling. His ribs ached where the harness had dug into them, but he could move. He had survived. The computer screen flickered weakly. Hull breach detected. Life support failing. External. Temperature -42 degrees Celsius. Taemin grabbed his emergency pack from its storage compartment. Inside were basic survival gear, medical supplies, and food rations for 3 days. Not much, but it would have to do. He struggled through the twisted corridor to the emergency airlock. The outer door had been damaged in the crash, but it still opened with a grinding sound. Cold air rushed in like a physical blow, stealing the breath from his lungs. Taemin stepped outside and gasped. The cold hit him even through his insulated flight suit. His breath came out in white clouds that froze and fell to the ground like tiny snowflakes. The wind cut through his clothing like invisible knives. The crash site looked worse from outside. His ship had carved a deep furrow in the ice, leaving scattered pieces of metal and plastic in its wake. Black smoke rose from the engine section. The communication array lay in twisted ruins 50 meters away. No calling for help, he said to himself. His voice sounded small in the vast emptiness around him. He looked around at his new home. Ice stretched to the horizon in every direction, broken only by those strange black rock formations. The sky was a dull gray color, and he could not tell where the sun was. Everything looked the same, cold, empty, and hostile to life. Taemin went back inside the ship to salvage what he could. The computer still worked, running on emergency power. He downloaded what data he could onto a portable device. The life support systems were failing, but he managed to remove some heating elements and power cells. In the cargo bay, he found an emergency shelter, a small inflatable dome designed for temporary use. It would not keep him warm for long, but it was better than sleeping in the open. As he worked, the temperature inside the ship kept dropping. His fingers grew numb despite his gloves. Every breath felt like swallowing ice. He had to keep moving or he would freeze. By the time he finished salvaging useful materials, darkness was falling. The gray sky turned black, and stars appeared overhead. They looked cold and distant, offering no comfort. Taemin set up his emergency shelter near the ship's wreckage. The inflatable dome was small, barely large enough for one person to lie down inside. He arranged the heating elements around the walls and connected them to a power cell. The shelter grew slightly warmer, but not by much. His breath still came out in white clouds. He ate one of his rations, a tasteless protein bar that felt like cardboard in his mouth. The food made him feel a little stronger, but he knew it would not last long. Outside his small shelter, the wind howled across the ice. It sounded like the voices of angry ghosts. Taemin tried not to think about how alone he was on this frozen world. He was checking his equipment when he saw them. Tracks in the snow around his shelter. They were much larger than any animal tracks he had ever seen. The prints showed long, narrow feet with what looked like claw marks at the ends. The tracks circled his position in a perfect ring, staying exactly 20 meters away from his shelter. Whatever had made them had been watching him while he worked. It had been close enough to attack, but it had chosen not to. Taemin felt the hair on the back of his neck stand up. He was not alone on this frozen world after all. Something lived here in the endless ice and bitter cold. Something intelligent, enough to observe him from a safe distance. He checked his sidearm, a small plasma pistol with enough charge for maybe 20 shots. It would not be much use against a large creature, but it made him feel better to have it. The wind grew stronger, shaking his small shelter. Ice crystals rattled against the walls like tiny bullets. Somewhere in the darkness, something was watching him. He could feel invisible eyes studying his every move. Taemin settled down to wait for morning, his pistol in his hand. He had survived the crash and the first day on this hostile world. But he had a feeling that his real test was just beginning. The tracks in the snow told him that he was being hunted. The question was whether the hunter meant him harm, or was simply curious about this strange visitor from the stars. Taemin woke to the sound of something moving outside his shelter. His small heating units had kept him alive through the night, but barely. Ice had formed on the inside walls of his dome, and his water bottle was frozen solid. He grabbed his plasma pistol and carefully opened the shelter's flap. The cold morning air hit his face like a slap. Outside, fresh snow had covered his tracks from the day before, but the mysterious footprints around his camp were still visible. New tracks led away from his shelter toward a cluster of black rocks, about 100 meters away. Whatever had been watching him was still out there. Taemin ate another protein bar and tried to think. His food would last 2 more days if he was careful. The heating units were already using too much power from his salvaged batteries. He needed to find a better source of warmth or he would die. He decided to explore the area around his crash site. Maybe he could find some shelter among those rock formations. At the very least, he needed to understand what kind of creatures lived on this world. The walk to the rocks was harder than he expected. The snow was knee-deep in places, and the bitter wind never stopped blowing. By the time he reached the first stone outcropping, his legs ached and his lungs burned from breathing the freezing air. The rocks were not natural formations. They had been carved and shaped by intelligent hands. Strange symbols were etched into the black stone, forming patterns that hurt his eyes to look at. This was definitely the work of thinking beings. "Hello," he called out, feeling foolish. His voice was swallowed by the wind almost immediately. "I'm not here to hurt anyone. I just need help." Nothing answered him except the endless howling of the wind. He was examining one of the carved stones when he heard footsteps behind him. Taemin spun around, his pistol ready, and froze at what he saw. 3 creatures stood watching him from about 10 meters away. They were tall and thin, nearly 3 meters in height, with skin that looked like blue crystal. Their bodies seemed to glow with a faint inner light, and they moved with strange, flowing grace. The one in the center was clearly the leader. She had intricate patterns carved into her crystalline skin and wore what looked like armor made from the same black stone as the monuments. Her large eyes studied him with obvious intelligence. "Warm blood," she said in accented but clear English. "You are far from your hunting grounds." Taemin slowly lowered his weapon. "You speak my language." "We have encountered your kind before," the leader replied. Her voice had a musical quality, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "They came in great ships to take what is not theirs. They brought fire and death to our world." "I'm not like them," Taemin said quickly. "My ship crashed. I'm alone and stranded here." One of the other beings, a male with darker blue skin, stepped forward. "Lies, warm blood. Your kind knows only taking and destroying. We should leave you to freeze as you have left us to die." The leader held up a hand to silence him. Peace, Minho. This one is different. Look at him. He has no great weapons, no army. His fire shell lies broken on our ice. She moved closer to Tai Min, studying him like a scientist examining an interesting specimen. Up close, he could see that her crystalline skin was beautiful and complex, with veins of light running through it like living circuits. I am Sora, she said. Leader of this hunting band, what are you called, small warm blood? Taemin, he replied. Captain Taemin of the Earth ship Meridian. Earth, Sora repeated the word slowly. We have not heard this name before. The other warm blood spoke of Caltheria. Taemin felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold air. The Caltherian Empire was known throughout this part of the galaxy for their brutal expansion policies. If these people had encountered Caltherians, it explained their hostility toward him. I'm human, he said. We're not the same as Caltherians. We don't conquer other worlds. Minho laughed bitterly. All warm bloods say such things before they show their true nature. The third being, who had remained silent, finally spoke. It was a younger male with brighter blue skin. But look at how he suffers in our cold. The Firebringers wore great suits of armor against our world's breath. This one shivers like a newly hatched ice runner. Jinwoo speaks wisdom, Sora said, thoughtfully. You are not like the others. But why should we trust you, Taemin of Earth? Taemin thought carefully before answering. These beings could kill him easily if they wanted to. His only chance was to convince them that he meant no harm. Because I need your help to survive, he said honestly. And maybe you need mine too. Sora tilted her head. What could a weak warm blood offer to the Hyerim? Knowledge, Taemin said. I've traveled between many worlds. I know things about technology, about survival, about fighting enemies who seem too strong to defeat. Minho snorted. Pretty words. But words do not protect against Caltherian death rays. The Caltherians are here? Taemin asked. They have been poisoning our world for 3 seasons, Sora said sadly. They dig great holes in the ice and steel, the heat stones that keep our people alive. Each day our world grows colder. Each day more of our people enter the final sleep. Taemin understood now. The Caltherians were strip mining this world for geothermal energy sources. Without those thermal vents, the planet's ecosystem was collapsing. I was caught in an ion storm yesterday, he said. That wasn't natural, was it? The Caltherians are using weather control technology. Sora's eyes widened slightly. You know of storm weaving? I know they use it to clear the skies for their mining operations, Taemin said. My ship was just in the wrong place when they activated it. The 3 beings exchanged looks in their musical language. Finally, Sora turned back to him. You are either very clever or very honest, she said. Perhaps both. We will take you to our settlement. But know this, Taemin of Earth. If you betray us as the other warm bloods did, you will die slowly. Understood, Taemin said. Jinwoo stepped forward. Your fire shell produced much smoke. The Sky Hunters will come to investigate soon. We must move quickly. Sora nodded. Gather what you need from your broken vessel, warm blood. We travel to the deep caves where the thermal winds still flow. There you will tell us more of these Earth humans and their ways. As they walked back toward his crashed ship, Taemin felt a spark of hope for the first time since landing on this frozen world. These Hyerim were not just intelligent, they were desperate, and desperate people were often willing to take chances they might otherwise reject. Maybe, just maybe, he could find a way to help them fight back against the Caltherians, and in doing so he might find his own way off this dying world. The journey to the Hyerim settlement took most of the day. Taemin struggled through the deep snow while his guides moved across the frozen surface like they were walking on solid ground. His human body was not built for this environment, and every step was a battle against the crushing cold. Sora watched him carefully as they traveled. Several times she called for rest stops when she saw him stumbling with exhaustion. Minho complained about the delays, but Jinwoo helped Taemin by breaking trail through the deepest snowdrifts. The warm blood will slow us down when the Sky Hunters come, Minho grumbled during one of their stops. Perhaps, Sora replied, but he may also surprise you. The settlement was hidden in a deep canyon between towering black cliffs. As they descended into the narrow valley, Timon felt the temperature rise slightly. Steam rose from cracks in the rock walls, and patches of dark earth showed through the snow. Thermal vents, he said with relief. You've built your home near a geothermal field. The heat stones keep us alive, Sora confirmed, but each day they grow weaker as the Firebringers steal their power. The Hiram homes were carved directly into the canyon walls connected by narrow bridges and walkways. Dozens of the crystalline beings moved about their daily tasks, tending to equipment that looked like a mix of advanced technology and primitive craftsmanship. Timon was brought before the settlement's elders in a large chamber warmed by natural hot springs. The room was filled with Hiram of all ages, from ancient beings whose crystal skin had turned almost white to youngsters who glowed with bright blue light. An elderly female named Haye Jin examined his frostbitten fingers with gentle touches. Her warm hands felt wonderful against his frozen skin, and he realized that the Hiram could control their body temperature like living heaters. The warm blood suffers greatly from our world's breath, she announced to the gathering. His flesh shell is poorly made for the cold realm, yet he survived a full night in the outer ice, Sora pointed out, and he built fire warmth from the wreckage of his sky vessel. This shows wisdom. A young Hiram engineer named Doyon brought pieces of equipment salvaged from Taimin's ship. She had been studying them with obvious fascination. These heat makers are simple but clever, she said, holding up one of his heating units. The warm blood used metal strips to spread the fire energy more evenly. We could learn from such methods. An older male elder spoke up. Learning from warm bloods brought us only pain before. The Firebringers shared their knowledge freely at first, then used our trust to poison our world. This one is not like the Firebringers, Jinwoo said boldly. He asks for our help instead of demanding it. And his sky vessel carried no death weapons. The debate continued for hours while Timon sat quietly, trying to understand their musical language. Finally, Sora stood and called for silence. The storm season comes early this year, she announced. The great cold will last for many hands of days. Even our thermal caves may not provide enough warmth to keep all our people alive. Worried murmurs ran through the gathered Hiram. Tae-min could see the fear in their large eyes. What if we combined our knowledge, he suggested. I know things about thermal dynamics and heat conservation. You understand your world's patterns better than anyone. Together we might find solutions neither of us could discover alone. Minho stood up angrily. More pretty words. What proof do we have that you will not betray us as the others did? Taemin thought for a moment, then began removing pieces of equipment from his pack. He laid out his portable computer, his medical scanner, and even his plasma pistol on the stone floor. Take them, he said simply. Everything I have. If I betray you, you'll have all my technology. If I help you, we can use these tools to fight the Caltherians together. The chamber fell silent. No one had expected such a gesture from the strange warm-blood visitor. Sora picked up the plasma pistol and examined it carefully. This is a weapon of your people? Yes, Taemin said. It's small, but effective against most armor types. Though, I doubt it would do much damage to Caltherian battlesuits, but it might damage their equipment, Doyon said thoughtfully. Their machines are not built for extreme cold. If we could make them fail at the right moment. Over the following days as the great storm approached, Taemin worked closely with the Hiram to prepare for the harsh weather ahead. He showed them how to build better insulation using materials from his ship. In return, they taught him about the planet's thermal systems and weather patterns. Yi-Jin was amazed by his medical scanner, which could detect internal injuries and infections that were invisible to Hiram's senses. She began treating wounded members of her people with techniques Taemin taught her from human field medicine. Jinwoo proved to be an excellent student of human engineering principles. Together, they designed new heating systems that could run on the planet's geothermal energy more efficiently than anything the Hiram had built before. But it was Doyon who made the most disturbing discovery. While studying Taemin's computer data, She found detailed readings from his ship's sensors during the ion storm that had brought him down. The storm was not natural, she announced to the settlement leaders. The energy patterns match the Firebringers' sky weapons perfectly. They're using weather control to clear the atmosphere for their mining operations, Taemin confirmed. My ship was just caught in the area when they activated it. Sora's skin darkened with anger. They create storms to make their stealing easier, while our people freeze in the cold they bring? It gets worse, Taemin said grimly. According to my readings, they're planning to trigger a massive atmospheric disturbance, something big enough to melt large sections of the polar ice caps. The implications hit the HFY leaders immediately. If the polar ice melted rapidly, it would flood the thermal valleys where most of their people lived. The survivors would be forced onto the surface, where they would freeze to death in the permanently cold air. Genocide, Minho said quietly. They mean to kill all of us. We have to fight back, Jinwoo declared. We cannot simply wait to die. With what? An elder asked bitterly. Our ice spears against their fire weapons? Our crystal skin against their metal shells? Taemin stood up slowly. An idea was forming in his mind. Dangerous, desperate, but possibly their only chance. What if we turned their own weapons against them? He asked. What if we used the cold that's killing your world to destroy their ability to operate here? Sora looked at him intently. Explain this thought, Warmblood. Caltharian technology is designed for temperate worlds, Taemin said. Their equipment struggles in extreme cold. That's why they need environmental suits and heated vehicles. But you, HFY, are perfectly adapted to cold environments. That's not a weakness. It's your greatest advantage. He walked over to the chamber's wall display, which showed a map of the mining operations. What if we could make their equipment fail when they needed it most? What if we could create conditions so cold that even their heated suits couldn't protect them? The chamber fell silent as the HFY considered his words. Finally, Sora spoke. You have a plan, Taemin of Earth? The beginning of one, he admitted, but I'll need your help to make it work, and it will be extremely dangerous for all of us. Minho stepped forward. Speak your plan, Warmblood. If there is a chance to strike back at the Firebringers, we will listen. Taemin spread his salvaged computer components across the stone table in Doyan's workshop. Around him, the most skilled HFY engineers and warriors studied his plan with growing excitement and fear. The Caltharians have 3 major mining facilities, he explained, pointing to locations on their crude map. Each one is built around a cluster of thermal vents. They're stealing the geothermal energy to power their operations and ship it off-world. Sora traced the locations with her crystalline finger. These are the heat stones that kept our ancestors alive for countless generations. Without them, the great cold spreads further each season. But that's also their weakness, Taemin continued. Their equipment depends on stable power and controlled temperatures. If we can disrupt both at the same time, their systems will fail. Minho leaned forward skeptically. And how does a small Warmblood propose to destroy facilities protected by energy barriers and death weapons? Taemin smiled grimly. We don't destroy them, we make them destroy themselves. He activated his portable computer and showed them a 3-dimensional display of the mining operation structure. Each facility uses massive thermal extractors to pull energy from your planet's core, he explained. They pump superheated steam through cooling systems to generate power. But what if those cooling systems suddenly failed? Doyan's eyes widened as she understood. The thermal pressure would build up until the whole system explodes, Taemin finished. The resulting steam release would create an instant localized blizzard. The temperature drop would be so severe and sudden that their backup systems couldn't compensate. Jinwoo studied the technical diagrams with growing enthusiasm. Their metal shells would freeze solid in moments. Their sky vessels could not fly in such conditions. But how do we reach their facilities to sabotage them? An elder asked. They are heavily guarded, and we have no way to penetrate their energy. Barriers, we don't need to get inside, Taemin said. We just need to overload their systems from the outside, and I know exactly how to do it. Over the next several days, Taemin worked with the HFY to build devices he called electromagnetic pulse generators. Using components from his crashed AI ship combined with higher crystal technology, they created weapons unlike anything either species had built before. The devices were simple in concept, but brilliant in execution. They would generate powerful electromagnetic fields that could disrupt electronic systems at a distance. In the extreme cold of the planet's surface, where Caltherian equipment was already operating at the edge of its design limits, even a small, electromagnetic pulse would cause catastrophic failures. Hai-Jin proved unexpectedly useful in the weapon construction. Her medical knowledge of bioelectric fields helped them understand how to focus the electromagnetic pulses more precisely. The Firebringer's metal shells have weak points where their heating elements connect, she observed while studying captured equipment. If we could target those specific areas, their environmental suits would fail instantly, Do-Yan finished excitedly. They would be as helpless as warmbloods in the great cold. But building the weapons was only the first part of Taemin's plan. The second part was far more dangerous. We need to coordinate our attacks perfectly, he explained to the assembled war party. All 3 facilities must be hit simultaneously. If even one remains operational, they'll be able to call for reinforcements from orbit. Sora looked troubled. Our people have never fought such a coordinated battle. We are hunters, not warriors. We strike alone or in small groups. Then we'll have to learn quickly, Taemin said. Because this isn't just about driving them away from one mining site. This is about making them abandon your world entirely. The plan required dividing their small force into 3 groups. Each team would approach one of the mining facilities during the next major storm, when the Caltherians would be relying most heavily on their environmental systems. Min-Ho would lead the attack on the northern facility, the largest and most heavily defended. His team included the best Hiram warriors and 2 of the electromagnetic pulse devices. Jinwoo would take a smaller group to hit the southern facility, which was newer and less established, but built on the most important thermal vents. Taemin would accompany Sora's team to attack the central facility, the command center that controlled weather manipulation for the entire operation. Why do you come with us, Warmblood? Sora asked him privately. You could stay here in safety while we fight your battle. It's not my battle, Taemin replied. It's our battle now, and I have skills your people need. I know Caltherian technology better than anyone here. The waiting was the hardest part. For 3 days they prepared their equipment and rehearsed their coordinated timing. The electromagnetic pulse devices were tested and retested. Escape routes were planned and backup plans developed. Do-Yan worked tirelessly to modify their weapons for maximum effectiveness against Caltherian armor. She discovered that by tuning the electromagnetic frequency to match the resonance of their metal alloys, she could cause their equipment to literally vibrate itself apart. The Firebringers build their metal shells to resist heat weapons and cutting tools, she explained proudly. But they never considered attacks that make their own armor work against them. Finally, the storm they had been waiting for arrived. This was not just any weather system, but one of the great ice storms that struck the planet every few months. Winds strong enough to tear apart unprotected structures and temperatures cold enough to freeze exposed flesh in seconds. Perfect conditions, Taemin said as he checked his equipment one final time. The Caltherians will be completely dependent on their environmental systems. When those fail, they will learn what it means to face the true cold of our world, Sora said with grim satisfaction. The 3 teams departed under cover of the howling storm. Communication would be impossible once they separated, so everything depended on precise timing and flawless execution. As Taemin followed Sora's team across the frozen wasteland toward their target, he felt a strange sense of pride. These brave crystalline beings had accepted him not as a conqueror or savior, but as an equal partner in their struggle for survival. He had crashed on their world as a helpless victim. Now, he was about to help them strike back against one of the most feared military forces in the galaxy. The storm raged around them as they approached the central mining facility. Through the swirling snow, Taemin could see the lights of the Caltherian base glowing like a small city in the darkness. Soon, those lights would go out forever, and the Caltherian Empire would learn that some worlds fought back in ways they never expected. The Caltherian mining facility rose from the frozen plain like a metallic mountain. Towers and processing units stretched into the stormy sky, connected by heated walkways that glowed with orange light. Steam vented from dozens of thermal extraction points, creating a small pocket of warmth in the endless cold. Taemin crouched behind an ice ridge with Sora and her team, watching the facility through the swirling snow. Even through the storm, he could see Caltherian guards patrolling in their bulky environmental suits. They move slowly, Sora observed. The cold makes them clumsy. Their suits are working overtime just to keep them alive, Taemin agreed. When we hit them with the electromagnetic pulse, those suits will shut down completely. He checked his timing device. In exactly 3 minutes, all 3 teams would launch their attacks simultaneously. Everything depended on perfect coordination. Remember, he whispered to the HFY warriors around him, target the main power distribution center first. Once their grid goes down, the cascade failure will do the rest of the work for us. Sora nodded grimly. And if the Firebringers try to fight back? In this storm, without their environmental suits? Taemin shook his head. They'll be too busy trying not to freeze to death. The final minute crawled by with agonizing slowness. Taemin could hear his own heartbeat over the howling wind. Around him, the HFY team prepared their weapons with practiced efficiency. Now, he said quietly. Sora raised her hand, and her warriors moved forward like ghosts in the storm. Their crystalline skin made them nearly invisible against the ice and snow, while their natural cold resistance let them move at full speed across terrain that would cripple any warm-blooded being. Taemin followed more slowly, carrying the electromagnetic pulse device. The weapon was heavy and awkward, built from salvaged chip components and HFY crystal technology. But if it worked, it would be the most devastating weapon ever used against the Caltherian Empire. The first part of the attack went flawlessly. Sora's team reached the facility's outer perimeter without being detected. The storm provided perfect cover, and the Caltherian sensors were focused on detecting large heat signatures rather than the cold-adapted HFY. Taemin set up the electromagnetic pulse device behind a thermal exhaust vent, where the metal structure would amplify its effect throughout the facility's power grid. Around him, HFY warriors took positions near critical systems. Ready, Sora whispered through their crude communication system. Taemin activated the device. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then every light in the facility flickered and went out. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Emergency. Lighting failed to activate. Heating systems shut down. The energy barriers that protected the facility's entrances collapsed. Most importantly, the environmental suits worn by every Caltherian in the base stopped functioning. Through the darkness, Taemin could hear shouts of alarm and confusion. Caltherian voices called out in their harsh language, trying to coordinate a response to the sudden system failure. But there would be no response. In temperatures of -50 degrees, with winds strong enough to knock down an unprotected being, the Caltherians had perhaps minutes before hypothermia set in. The second phase of the attack began when Sora's team struck the thermal extraction equipment. Using weapons crafted from salvaged ship components, they systematically destroyed the cooling systems that regulated the facility's power generation. Without proper cooling, the pressure in the thermal extractors began to build rapidly. Taemin could hear the deep rumbling sound of steam pipes overloading throughout the complex. "Get clear," he shouted to the HFY team. "The whole system is about to blow." They retreated to a safe distance just as the first thermal extractor exploded. Superheated steam erupted into the frozen air, creating an instant blizzard as the moisture condensed and froze. The temperature dropped by another 20 degrees in a matter of seconds. One by one, the other extractors exploded in chain reaction. Each blast sent more steam into the already frigid air, creating a localized ice age around the facility. Within minutes, the entire complex was buried under a thick layer of frozen condensation. Any Caltherians who had survived the initial power failure would not survive this. The combination of system failure and extreme environmental conditions had turned their heavily defended base into a frozen tomb. But Taemin's satisfaction was short-lived. In the distance, he could see lights in the sky. Caltherian aircraft approaching from other facilities. Either Minho or Jinwoo's teams had failed in their mission. "Sky Hunters come," Sora said urgently. "We must flee before they arrive." As they retreated across the frozen wasteland, Taemin activated a backup communication device he had built from ship components. Static filled the channel, but he could make out voices, human voices. "This is rescue ship Terra Nova. Calling crashed. Vessel Meridian," a familiar voice said through the static. "Captain Taemin, please respond if you can hear this transmission." Taemin's heart leaped. Against all odds, Earth had found him. But as he looked back at the High-Aram team that had risked everything to help him, he realized he faced an impossible choice. "Taemin of Earth," Sora said, apparently understanding his dilemma. "Your sky people have come for you." "Yes," he said quietly. "But this isn't over. The Caltherians will return with more forces. Your people still need help." Sora smiled, an expression that was beautiful and strange on her crystalline features. "Perhaps. But you have given us something more valuable than weapons or victory in battle." "What's that?" "Hope," she said simply. "You have shown us that the cold which kills our enemies can also protect us, that our weaknesses can become strengths if we are clever enough to use them." The rescue ship's signals grew stronger as it approached their location. Through the storm, Taemin could see lights descending from the sky, human ships coming to take him home. But as he looked around at the frozen battlefield, where a small group of desperate beings had struck back against impossible odds, he realized that home might not be what he expected anymore. "Captain Taemin," the radio crackled again. "We have you on sensors. Prepare for pickup." Taemin keyed his transmitter. "Terra Nova, this is Captain Taemin. I'm alive and well, but I'm not alone down here. There are indigenous people who need our help." A pause. Then, "Copy that, Captain. Expanding rescue operation to include local population." Sora looked at him curiously. "What did you tell them?" "The truth," Taemin said. "That we're allies now. That Earth doesn't abandon its friends." Over the following days, as human ships arrived to help evacuate High-Aram settlements and establish emergency shelters, Taemin learned that their coordinated attack had been even more successful than planned. All 3 mining facilities had been destroyed, and the surviving Caltherians had fled the system entirely. But more importantly, word of their victory was spreading to other worlds oppressed by the Caltherian Empire. Species that had given up hope of resistance were beginning to fight back, using the tactics that Taemin and the High-Aram had pioneered. "You could return to Earth as a hero," Sora told him, as they watched human engineers working alongside High-Aram technicians to build a permanent research station. "Your people would celebrate your survival and your victory over the Firebringers." Taemin considered this. Earth would indeed welcome him back. He would be promoted, decorated, given his choice of assignments. He could spend the rest of his career safely exploring distant stars. "I could," he agreed. "But I think I'm needed here more." He had crashed on this frozen world as a victim of circumstance, a pilot whose ship had failed at the worst possible moment. But he was leaving it as something different, a bridge between 2 species, a teacher who had learned as much as he had taught. The frozen wasteland that had nearly killed him had become the birthplace of an interstellar resistance movement. And somewhere in the galaxy, other desperate people were discovering that survival wasn't just about enduring impossible conditions. Sometimes it was about refusing to give up when everyone expected you to fail. It was about finding strength in the most unlikely places and allies among the most unexpected people. It was about proving that the human spirit, and the spirit of anyone willing to fight for their freedom, could never be frozen, no matter how cold the universe became.